On the day of his father's funeral, he showed up at the gates of the $80 million mansion, the place that used to be home, but his stepmother had locked the door and declared, "You don't belong here anymore." What she didn't know was... Do you think he just walked away in silence? Stay with us as we uncover the truth behind that locked door. The one who called Travis was Susan. Her voice was flat, like she was reading off a note. "Edward passed away last night. The funeral's on Friday. Don't worry about flying back if you're busy." That was it. Not a single word of sympathy. No asking if Travis was okay. Not even once did she say the word father. Just a cold call, and then she hung up. 3 days later, Travis stood in front of the deep black iron gates of the Palm Beach mansion, still gripping the handle of his rolling suitcase. He wore a white shirt, a dark jacket. His tie was loose. The tightness in his throat wasn't from the heat. It was from the weight in his chest, like someone had stacked a ton of bricks on it. That house used to smell like his mother's perfume every Sunday morning. Used to echo with the sharp click of his father's leather shoes crossing the stone floor as he left his study. Used to erupt in barking the second pour Travis stepped into the backyard after practice. Now the gates were sealed shut, and a stranger, built like a boulder, stood blocking the entrance. Not family, not someone Travis had ever seen before. "Who are you?" the guy asked. Travis replied flatly, "I'm Edward Morgan's son." The man glanced at his phone, then answered without a flicker of emotion, "Your name's not on the list." Travis frowned. "What list?" No answer. Instead, a woman in black stepped out from a side door. Susan. Hairpin tight, red lips, dark sunglasses, a wine glass in hand, like she'd just come from a party. Not a trace of someone who just lost a husband. "You're late," Susan said coolly. "We held the service this morning, very private, per his wishes." "His wishes?" Travis echoed, stunned. "My father wanted me kept out of his own funeral?" Susan shrugged. "You know how he was. He wanted peace, and to avoid unnecessary drama." "Unnecessary." Travis nearly laughed. He gripped the suitcase handle tighter, trying to keep his hands from shaking. "I want to go in, just to light some incense, or say a last word." Susan took a slow sip of wine. "It's over. If you need anything, talk to the lawyer." The gate shut. The bodyguard stepped back into place, and Travis, the only son of a man who once shook up Florida politics, stood outside the iron fence like a stranger. He sat down on a stone bench across from the mansion, not really sure what he was waiting for, maybe just to feel something real, to let it sink in that his father was truly gone, and that there was no place for him at the funeral. After a while, people began leaving the house, all strangers. Black suits, luxury cars, but not a single familiar face. No Uncle Hank, his father's younger brother. No Aunt Marjorie, the one who once held Travis's hand at his mother's funeral. Everything erased, like the family had never existed. "You Travis?" An older man's voice came from behind. It was Mr. Dwight, the Morgans' neighbor for over 30 years. He used to help Travis's dad fix the sprinkler system whenever it broke. Travis nodded. Mr. Dwight glanced around, then pulled a color photo from his jacket pocket. "I figured you should have this," he said quietly. Travis looked at the photo. A small ceremony. The mansion's backyard, a black casket draped in white silk, a young pastor, Susan, in the center, holding a bouquet. Next to her, Dylan, her son from a previous marriage. That was it. No one from Edward's side of the family. No one from his mother's side. No one from the past life Edward Morgan had before Susan showed up. "She didn't invite anyone," Mr. Dwight shook his head. "Just a few people she's been seeing lately. When I asked, she said we wanted to keep it private, for family only." "Family?" Travis said, the word cutting out of him like a blade. "Did she forget who I am?" Mr. Dwight placed a hand on his shoulder, light, like an apology. "I don't think this is what he would have wanted. Edward, he was always proud of you." Travis looked at the photo one more time, then folded it and slipped it into his pocket. He stood up. His eyes were dry now, but sharper. Not out of anger, but because something inside him had just cracked open. Death was one thing, but being stripped of his place as a son, cut out of the very house he grew up in, that was something else. That was betrayal. Cold, calculated. Susan had locked the door. But what she didn't know was that Travis had brought something she couldn't control, and she'd find out soon enough. Travis returned to his short-term rental near the beach, his head still spinning. He hadn't eaten all day. Not because of hunger, but because whatever was consuming him had nothing to do with his stomach. It was shock. It was the feeling of being erased. The next morning, a large envelope arrived, addressed in his name. Sender, Susan Morgan, postmarked the day of the funeral. Inside was a copy of the official will. The very first line stopped him cold, standing still in the middle of the room. I, Edward James Morgan, being of sound mind, leave all of my assets, including the Palm Beach estate, all investments and shares in Morgan Real Estate Group, to my current wife, Susan Morgan, and her son, Dylan Marcus Caldwell. His name wasn't there. Not a single line. No note saying, my biological son is to receive nothing. No explanation, as if he had never existed. He read it again, each word landing like a blow to the chest. Then again, his hands trembled, not because of the money, but because this came from the man who once called him the last thing I'm proud of in this life. He remembered the call clearly. It had only been a week ago. Edward's voice had been weak, but still firm. I've been rethinking the will. Did Susan have anything to say about that? Travis asked, already knowing the answer. I need to change it. You deserve it more than anyone. That last line echoed in his head like a bell ringing through the dark, and now the papers in front of him erased it all, like none of it had ever happened. He couldn't let that stand. Harper, his father's personal attorney for over 20 years, was the first person Travis went to. Her office sat on the ground floor of a midtown office building. The door was open. Inside, the same old wooden bookshelves and warm desk lamp he used to study under as a kid. Harper looked up when she saw him. Her eyes softened. No one needed to say anything. She already knew why he was there. I figured it would get to you, she said slowly, motioning to the chair across from her. That will. Travis sat down without a word. Harper studied him for a long moment before opening a drawer and pulling out a slim, carefully sealed folder. 3 months ago, she began, your father asked me to draft a new version. He was very clear. All fixed assets would go to you. His company shares would be split 2 ways, between you and a charitable foundation in your mother's name. Travis clenched his hands. Then what happened? Harper nodded, her expression hardening. Susan called me just a week later, said Edward had decided to change attorneys. No explanation, no reason given. I was cut out of everything, every legal process from that point on. She had the right to do that? Travis asked. If he signed a power of attorney to transfer legal representation, then yes. But at that point, Edward had already started taking heavy sedatives. Travis's brow furrowed. You're saying he wasn't mentally competent? I can't make that judgment, Harper said, her voice dropping. All I can tell you is, in our final meeting, he didn't recognize me for the first few minutes. That wasn't the Edward I knew. Silence settled between them like a thick curtain. Travis looked at the folder in Harper's hands. That draft, do you still have it? Yes, but it was never signed, which means it holds no legal weight, Harper said. Then she paused, locking eyes with him. But it proves something important. His true intent wasn't what Susan claims. Travis sat still. His father's final months had been severed from everything familiar. The lawyer, replaced, family, shut out, isolation. He stared at the paper in front of him. It wasn't just a draft. It was a warning that never got heard. A voice that was cut off before it could speak. A father who had been preparing to leave everything to his son, replaced, on paper, by a sound-minded man who chose to erase his own child from every asset, every line. Travis knew. This wasn't a mistake. Someone had orchestrated this, and that someone was sitting comfortably in an $80 million mansion, in a black dress, toasting with red wine, calling herself the official widow. He folded the documents, stood up. His father's death was real. But what happened afterward? That might not have been an accident. Travis hadn't slept in days since leaving Harper's office. Everything was starting to line up, but it was too neat, too clean. Like someone had laid every brick in place from the beginning. Then a name surfaced in his mind. Frank, the old chef at the mansion. The one who used to argue with his father every morning over the salt in the eggs, but who also knew Edward Morgan better than anyone. What he liked, what he ate, what he couldn't stand. Frank had worked there for over a decade, practically family, until he suddenly vanished about 3 months ago. No explanation, no goodbye. Travis dug through old contacts in his phone. Wasn't sure the number still worked, but he sent a simple message anyway. "This is Travis. I need to see you. It's about my father." The message was read in under 10 minutes. Then a short reply came through. "Meet me behind the hardware store at 5. Come alone." Frank was leaning against a wall when Travis arrived. Same faded jean jacket, same beat-up cap, but his eyes were different now, guarded, dull, like someone who'd left something behind he wasn't ready to talk about. "No one knows we're talking, right?" Frank said the second Travis got close. "No one," Travis answered. "I just need to understand what happened." Frank exhaled, scanning the area. Then he said, "I got fired after I overheard the wrong phone call." "Overheard?" "The kitchen's right next to the study. I went in to grab a delivery slip and heard her, Susan, talking to someone. Voice was low, but I caught it clear. If he won't sign, I'll take care of it another way. We're running out of time." Travis clenched his fists. "You're sure she was talking about the will?" Frank nodded. "No one else was signing anything, and the next day I got the notice. No reason, no goodbye. That's when I knew I should keep my mouth shut." Travis stayed quiet. A man who'd been part of the household for over a decade, tossed out without a word, just for hearing what he wasn't meant to hear. Frank kept going. "You know something? Your dad? Sometimes he'd just sit there at the dining table for an hour. Not touch a thing, like someone had wiped him clean from the inside." That sentence hit Travis like ice down his spine. He left not long after, with a firm handshake from Frank and one warning: "Be careful. She's not the kind of woman who plays fair." The next day, Travis went to the clinic where his father had been treated. He asked for Edward's primary physician, Dr. Langdon, but was told the doctor had taken early retirement for personal reasons 2 months ago. No forwarding number, no contact info. Just gone. The medical records were still there. But Travis had to call in a favor from an old friend at the hospital just to get a look at them, and what he saw nearly knocked the breath out of him. 3 months ago, the prescription started changing. Different dosages, different combinations, and the prescribing physician wasn't Langdon anymore. It was someone completely new, R. Cohen. No record of a Dr. R. Cohen anywhere in the hospital system. No file, no credentials, nothing. Every prescription was loaded with strong sedatives, combined with mild antipsychotics, the kind usually reserved for patients showing signs of delusion or trauma-induced psychosis. And on every one of those scripts, the doctor's signature was printed. Not handwritten, no stamp of verification, no physical signature. Travis turned to the nurse friend who helped him access the files. Would a real doctor ever skip a handwritten signature? She shook her head. Only on internal memos, stuff that's never given to patients, and even then, it's not supposed to be used as an official prescription. Something's off here. Off. Not just off. This was manipulation. A deliberate attempt to cloud his father's mind. Travis returned to his apartment just as his phone buzzed. A message from Mr. Dwight, the old neighbor. "Did you hear? Susan threw a birthday party for Dylan at the mansion yesterday. Big one. DJ, lights, full buffet. Just 2 weeks after the funeral." Travis didn't respond. Instead, he opened his browser and searched Dylan's name. The profile was public. The first photo showed him, Dylan, arms up, posing in front of the mansion's pool, neon letters glowing behind him. "Happy 18th, Dylan." A crowd of teens danced around him, champagne glasses raised. Susan stood to the side, dressed in red, smiling like she was hosting a gala, not mourning a husband. Not a single trace of grief. Not a black veil. Not even the pretense of loss. Travis stared at the screen, his fingers lightly brushing the edge of the phone, trying to stop himself from hurling it across the room. 2 weeks after the funeral, the woman who had declared herself a grieving widow was throwing a party like nothing had ever happened. The same house that once held silence, incense, and respect for his father's legacy, now pulsed with bass, laughter, and lights. No normal person would do that. No decent one would. And if Susan could dance over fresh ashes, what else was she capable of before Edward ever died? Travis couldn't tear his eyes away from the stream of birthday photos. It wasn't the lights or the music that turned his stomach. It was the way Susan stood there. Radiant, unbothered, as if the man she'd spent a decade with had never existed. Everything in him narrowed to one purpose: prove that his father had been turned into a pawn, and that everything Susan now controlled was the product of a plan. 3 days later, while clearing out the storage room in the old satellite office his father once used in Boca Raton, Travis found something. A small wooden box, tucked behind paint cans and old invoices, coated in dust. Inside, a few worn leather notebooks, some yellowed receipts, and a black external hard drive. No label. He plugged it into his laptop, watching the light flicker on. Only one file sat in the root folder, lastrecord.move, created 3 months ago. Travis hit play. The image was grainy, but the man on screen was unmistakable. Edward Morgan, his hair now gray, his frame thin, wearing an unbuttoned shirt, sitting in his study. His face was worn, but his voice was steady. "I don't know how long I'll be able to think clearly," he said, eyes fixed on the camera. "So I need to record this. If I don't get the chance to redo my will, Travis needs to know. All the current assets, the mansion, shares, investments, were meant for him." Susan disagrees. "But this was my decision. I don't have much time left." His voice cracked at times, coughing between words, taking deep breaths to continue. But his final sentence was unmistakable. "If my son is cut out of the will, it's not because of me. Someone else changed everything." Travis stared at the screen. His chest tightened, not with pain but with a cold stone silence, both confirmation and the opening shot. He saved multiple copies of the video and sent one to Harper. An hour later she called back. "Enough to request a will re-examination," she said quickly. "I'll file the paperwork, including the old draft and the red flags from the medical records. But we need more." Travis nodded. "I know." They began reviewing everyone who had worked with Edward. A week later, Harper got in touch with Mr. Walters, the bank manager overseeing Edward's investment accounts for 7 years. He had just been reassigned internally. The meeting took place in a discreet office on the ground floor of a historic bank in downtown West Palm. Walters entered holding an envelope, his face serious. "I can't say much," he started, "but I can confirm one thing." He pulled out a detailed statement. 5 transactions totaling over $2.3 million transferred from Edward's account to one under Susan's name, all within 3 days before his death. Part cash, part invested in a newly opened private fund. "Mr. Edward never made transfers like this," Walters said. "He always went through me, checked everything 3 times, and absolutely never sent money before signing confirmation paperwork." Travis studied the statement. No emails, no handwritten signatures tied to the transactions. Everything was done online, from an IP address nowhere near Edward's home. What he felt now wasn't just anger, it was disgust, a deep, personal violation. He couldn't move forward without certainty. Was the signature on the will really his father's? Harper introduced a handwriting expert who had worked on major inheritance cases in the state. Travis brought the original will, the old draft, and several documents Edward had signed during his healthy years. The preliminary report arrived 3 days later. Less than 10 pages, but the conclusion left Travis frozen for hours. The signature on the official will shows signs of technical duplication, inconsistent with natural writing speed. Highly likely a digitally reproduced signature based on an existing sample. A forged signature on a will dividing $80 million in assets. Travis sent the full results to Harper. She replied with one sentence, "We'll file this in court." 2 days later, Susan struck back. A letter from her personal attorney arrived in Harper's mailbox, with a copy sent directly to Travis's email. The content was just 1 page. "Susan Morgan demands that Travis Morgan cease all defamatory actions, distortions, and damage to the reputation of the deceased. If unverified information continues to be spread, we will file lawsuits for libel and intentional harm to honor." No mention of the video. No response to the forensic report. Only threats. But Travis didn't back down. Not this time. She might control the mansion, block the funeral, play the role of the graceful widow. But once the truth starts speaking, no one can silence it. Despite Susan's warning, Harper filed a motion to investigate the legal validity of the will. Within 3 weeks, the Palm Beach County Court agreed to hold a preliminary hearing, a crucial step to determine if the published will was legitimate. On the morning of the hearing, Travis entered the main hall without a lawyer guiding him. The soft yellow ceiling lights cast shadows on his face, sharpening the lines hardened by months of loss, lies, and silence. Susan arrived later. A long black dress, a sheer veil, jeweled hairpins. Her eyes were red-rimmed, makeup light, Her hand rested on Dylan's neck, as if holding on to her only child for support. Dylan wore a dark suit, shoulders squared, eyes dropping whenever he caught a familiar face. He didn't say a word, didn't look at Travis once. They sat on the opposite side of the courtroom. Travis barely glanced their way. No nod, no bow, no need. His silence spoke louder than any accusation could. "The hearing will now begin," Judge Martin announced, his voice steady and low. "We will review the validity of the will submitted by Miss Susan Morgan, alongside the counter-evidence presented by the plaintiff, Mr. Travis Morgan." Harper stood and delivered her opening statement, sharp and concise. She outlined the lawyer change during Edward's treatment, the suspicious financial transactions, then introduced the video recorded by Edward himself, projecting it onto the large screen. The courtroom fell silent as the elderly man's voice echoed through the speakers. "If my son is cut out of the will, it's not because of me." Susan lowered her head at the words. Dylan closed his eyes. Next, Harper called her first witness, a woman with brown hair tied low, wearing a slate blue nurse's uniform. She introduced herself as Clarice Newton, who worked at the private hospital where Edward was treated during his final 3 months. Standing at the witness stand, her hands steady, eyes direct, she was ready. "Did you have direct contact with patient Edward Morgan?" the lawyer asked. "Yes," she said. "I was assigned to care for him for 46 days. Do you recall anything unusual during the period before Mr. Edward signed legal documents?" Clarice nodded. "I do, because I noticed irregularities. Can you specify?" "Mr. Edward was too weak to hold a glass by himself. There were times he asked me my name, sometimes he confused me with Travis's mother, and I was instructed by Mrs. Susan not to allow anyone to visit him, except herself and a private doctor." "What was the doctor's name?" "I wasn't given that information. Whenever he came, he wore no uniform, no name badge." The courtroom nearly held its breath. Judge Martin bent down to take notes. Susan stiffened, her arm withdrawing from Dylan's shoulder without anyone noticing. After Clarice, the forensic handwriting expert took the stand. He had handled inheritance disputes for 3 multinational companies, with extensive experience in signature forgery and financial fraud cases. He began with a set of documents comparing signatures from the new will against 10 documents Edward had signed during his healthy years. "We identified a 95% match in curves, pressure, and speed," he explained. "This level of consistency doesn't occur with natural handwriting." He pointed to the screen, where magnified strokes of the signature were displayed. "This," he said, "is the genuine signature. Each instance shows slight variations and different pressure." Then he switched to the new will's signature. "And this is an almost exact digital replica. No tremors, no pressure changes, no random differences." He paused before concluding. "The signature on the will shows signs of being digitally reconstructed using software. And without independent witness certification, I believe the signing process did not follow proper legal procedures." No one spoke after the expert left the stand. Judge Martin looked up, scanning from plaintiff to defendant. Based on the evidence presented, witness testimonies, and the independent expert's findings, the court finds signs of fraud and coercion in the current will. Susan closed her eyes, clutching her purse tightly. Dylan bowed his head, silent. The court orders a full reinvestigation into the estate division, including a thorough review of the will and all related financial transactions within 30 days prior to Edward Morgan's death. Reporters outside sprang to their feet. Cameras flashed, recorders clicked, phones tapped rapidly. Susan rose, pulling Dylan along. They left the courtroom without a word, not a glance in Travis's direction. He stayed seated, no smile, no nod, but the hand resting on his knee finally relaxed. The door to the truth doesn't open with shouting. It opens with undeniable evidence, and that door had just swung wide open, bright and clear. Nothing could be hidden behind it anymore. The final hearing was brief, without dispute. No grounds left to argue, no more secrets to hide. The court ruled the will presented by Susan Morgan was invalid. Based on Edward Morgan's recorded message, the legitimate draft was proven to reflect his true wishes. All the real estate, including the Palm Beach mansion, the majority of shares in Morgan Real Estate Group, and long-term investments, was transferred to Travis Morgan. Susan and Dylan were absent when the verdict was read. Their legal representatives sent a letter withdrawing from the dispute, in exchange for retaining a small portion of the estate, a cash sum and symbolic shares, as per a contingency clause in Edward's draft will. No one objected. Right after leaving the courthouse, Travis received the mansion's key from a court officer. No fancy words, just a cold, heavy iron key, neatly sealed in an envelope. He didn't open it right away. He didn't need to step inside to know what he had won back. It wasn't just the gray brick, high-roofed house in Palm Beach anymore. It was what his father had said long ago. Every decision should be done right, not for applause. 3 months later, the mansion was fully renovated, not to live in. Travis didn't need to relive the shattered memories, the walls that once echoed with battles between truth and lies. Instead, he transformed the entire space into a community fitness center. A place for former athletes like himself, those who once stood at the top only to lose everything to injury, accidents, or bad choices. And for teens with no opportunities, kids who, without a place to go, would drift into darkness. The old living room became a rehabilitation area. The kitchen turned into a nutrition class space. The upstairs bedrooms converted into temporary housing for students from out of town. Every brick, every window pane, every wall was preserved, but no longer carried the shadow of the past. In the mansion's library, Travis hung 2 photos. One of Edward, taken the day he was sworn in as state senator, holding an unfinished speech. The other of his mother in the backyard, laughing as her son tumbled into the grass. Below them, he engraved a single line: "Because no one deserves to be locked out of their own family's door." One weekend, an old neighbor stopped by, standing silently in front of the engraved words for a long time, then just nodded. No questions, no words. Susan was gone from the city. Word was she sold her luxury downtown condo and left without leaving a trace. Dylan transferred schools and disappeared from social media. News about the lawsuit quickly faded, replaced by fresh scandals. No one mentioned them anymore, and neither did Travis. He didn't need to forgive, but he didn't need to hate either. Because hatred is a room, and if you live there forever, you become the very person who once locked the door on you. One late afternoon, after a boxing class ended, Travis stood alone on the porch. The old iron gate, the one that once refused him entry, now stood wide open, never locked again. The late afternoon sun cast a soft, angled light across the stone patio, warming Travis's face with a gentle glow. In that moment, nothing extraordinary happened. No applause, no praise. Just a lightness in his chest, like a heavy stone had dropped away, leaving no shards behind. For the first time in years, Travis Morgan truly felt at home again. Not because he'd reclaimed what was taken, but because he'd chosen how to use it. Not for revenge, not to cage memories, but to open the door for those who'd ever been locked out, like him. And this time, no one could shut it again. Not everyone gets the chance to reclaim justice after loss. But sometimes, justice isn't just about taking back what was stolen. It's about how we choose to use it. Travis didn't seek revenge. He rebuilt. He didn't close a door. He opened one. Have you ever stood before a door that once belonged to you, only to find it locked by your own family? If it were you, would you break it down and walk away, or find another way to hold on to what matters? Share your thoughts in the comments below. And if you think this story deserves to be heard, don't forget to hit subscribe so you won't miss the next ones.